The truth is out there.
It is one of the world's greatest mysteries, Scotland's legendary Loch Ness Monster. So does the lake creature actually exist? Well, if you ask one man, he'll tell you it is in fact no myth.
Every day it's flaunted in front of your face.
Hundreds of people in the valley say they are hearing voices in their heads.
You just choose to ignore it.
Belief can be a powerful force. No one knows that better than the people who are sure they've seen Bigfoot.
Real accounts.
He says he knows who's playing mind games.
Rogue government officials that are sponsoring this, also corrupt business officials, and private citizens.
From real people.
Hundreds of people turned out tonight for the unveiling of a very controversial statue.
Yeah, it really is. The Satanic Temple of Detroit revealed the 1-ton bronze statue.
It's time for you to take a swim.
I'm just excited to see my Lord and Savior Baphomet represented in such glorious Italian stone. I do hope his eyes gaze upon me, and that my allegiance is recognized.
In the dark waters.
The Dark Waters channel is for entertainment purposes only. Although information in these stories can be traced back to relevant and true sources, Dark Waters strongly discourages its viewers, listeners, and subscribers from visiting the site of incidents and encounters discussed or revealed on the show. In other words, we will not be held responsible if you are attacked by a Dogman, molested by a Bigfoot, bitten by vampires, chased by chupacabras, abducted by aliens, accosted by the Men in Black, investigated or arrested by the local law enforcement, CIA, FBI, NSA, EPA, BLM, or another alphabet group, whether on U.S. soil or abroad. Thank you for tuning in, and enjoy the show.
Years ago, I had a job working as a hospice home care professional. This was some rough and emotional work because you tend to get attached to people. And pretty soon, they're dead and gone. Back in those days, I cared for this older lady. And as her health started to decline, we needed to move her from an upstairs bedroom to a downstairs bedroom to make her a little bit more comfortable. Shuffling people around their own house is something that happens all the time. So we had to move her bed, dresser, mirror, and all her clothes downstairs. Over the time I spent with this lady at her house, I began to notice the atmosphere just felt off. No cold spots or anything I could put my finger on, but just this general feeling that things weren't quite right. So I started moving her stuff downstairs, at least the things I can handle for myself. She has this huge mahogany dresser where she keeps all her clothes. It was so heavy that I knew I was going to need to get someone to help me move it. And even with 2 people, it probably needed to be emptied of all its contents in order to make it down the stairs. I called one of my friends and offered to treat him to lunch in exchange for helping me move this lady's stuff. After eating lunch at the restaurant a few blocks down, we headed back to the house and began moving her items. We moved the bed, the dresser, the mirror, everything. And we began to reorganize and set up the downstairs bedroom for her, replacing all the items and clothes and putting them back where they belong. That's when my friend picks up this stack of shirts to replace in the drawer. He suddenly stops, turns to me and asks, "What the hell is this?" I turn around and see him holding a piece of pink gauzy material in one hand and a small doll in the other. He handed me the doll to take a closer look. And the only thing I can describe it as is a voodoo doll. He had this pale colored material body, trousers, a jacket, and a long lock of hair hanging from his head. And what was more strange was the symbol that was on his chest. It was a triangle with an eyeball inside of it. It also had a drawn-on face with small beads for eyes. The thing wasn't big at all, maybe 6 inches in length, but it was very detailed. Looking at this thing scared me. You have to realize I spent a lot of time in the house with this woman. So I tried to be cool and laugh it off, saying, "Man, I never seen that before. Let's put it back where we got it from." So we wrapped it back up and put it back in the drawer. The next day when I'm alone with her, I sit down and I start asking her these small questions, leading up to the big question about where the doll came from. Halfway through this conversation, she looks up at me and says, "I know you found my doll." She had a different look in her eyes, something I'd never seen before, something menacing and evil. Then she said, "It would behoove you to leave that alone." She didn't have to tell me twice. I never asked her about that doll again. I never even went in that drawer again. A few months later, she passed and I was assigned to another household. I'll never say that I was happy that someone died, But all I can say is I was happy to be out of that house. Dude, do you know what it's like to be locked up inside a mental hospital? Well, I do. You see, 5 years ago I had a mental breakdown. Went through a divorce, lost my wife. My son had this terrible car accident in which he was handicapped, and life just became too much for me. So I just couldn't handle it. I had a mental break. So I ended up at one of the few local mental hospitals in Louisiana. My family figured I needed help. And to be honest with you, I really did, because I constantly had thoughts of committing suicide and doing evil things. Now, spending the night in a mental hospital is not exactly like what you see on TV. It's not spooky and creepy. The building was well lit. Sheets were clean. People were friendly and nice. Now, some of the other people who were there with me really were off their rock. I'm talking about people talking to themselves, talking to walls, talking to clocks, talking to pennies, complete craziness. Made me quickly realize that I was probably more depressed than anything. I had been there 2 days and had no problems whatsoever. It was about 11:30 at night, and I was getting ready to go to bed. And as I lay on my back on my bed, for some reason, I turned and looked at the doorway. And there was this little boy standing there. A little black boy, no more than 12 years old. He's standing there. He's got these sogging, soaking wet clothes on. Looked like he had just got out of the swimming pool wearing all his clothes. This little boy stands there and stares at me. Then he raises his hand and points towards the window. I turn and look and then look back, and he's gone. Some freaky, creepy, weird stuff. A few minutes later, I get the urge to pee, so I get up and head out to the hallway. And as I'm walking through the threshold of the door, there's a small puddle of water there. Now, I'm thinking to myself, okay, what I saw was real, because there's real water here. Now, mind you, my mental health is not the strongest at this point in time, so there's absolutely no one who would believe this. So I proceed to go to the bathroom and think nothing of it. When I return to my room and lay in my bed, I notice that my sheets are a little damp and moist. You know, not soaking wet, but if you can ever imagine laying under the covers and sweating, you know how your body sweats and it soaks into the sheets? That's what it felt like. It was warm and moist, like someone had been laying in my bed. Again, I'm inside the loony bin, and I can't tell these people this is what I'm experiencing because they will for sure keep me there much longer than I need to be. So I ignore it. For a while, nothing crazy happened. Until one Saturday night, we were having movie night. I was sitting there in my chair, eating popcorn, watching a movie with everyone else. And I noticed one of the other guys there with me, Tom, he's not focused on the movie. He's staring at the doorway. My gaze slowly drifts towards the doorway, and there he is again, the little black boy, soaking wet, dripping with water. After the movie, I asked Tom, hey, did you see that little boy? Tom was a bit of a smartass, and he said, yeah, I see a lot of things in here. It's the loony bin. I said, no, did you really see a little black boy with soaking wet clothes like he was wet? He said, yeah, I see him all the time, him and his older brother. His older brother, I said? He said, yeah, his older brother, the big black guy who walks around with the rope and chains. I hadn't seen anything like this, but Tom went on to speculate and share with me that he believed that the little boy was a ghost and that the older guy was his brother. 2 days later, it's midnight. I had way too much to drink, my bladder was full, and I had to go to the restroom. And as I'm walking down the hallway, I see what Tom was talking about. A black man, 6'4", 300 and something pounds, complete muscle mass is how I would describe this man. In his left hand is a rope, and his right hand is a chain. And he's just standing there at the end of the hallway. And then the lights at the end of the hallway flicker, and this guy's eyes glow red. Talk about freaking me out. I turn around, run back in my room, and close the door. The next morning, I call my sister and tell her it's time for me to leave this facility. I don't care where you take me or where you put me, but transfer me to another facility. For the next 72 hours, I was terrified as I waited to leave that facility. When I finally walked out of those doors, I realized that the things that happened to me in my life were very unfortunate and unfair. But the shit I saw inside that facility was absolutely crazy. I live in a house about 15 miles outside of Omaha, Nebraska. And my closest neighbor is more than a mile away. About 3 months ago, I was in bed. About 11:30, my dog just starts barking, going berserk, and scratching at the door. I hurry up and grab her by a collar and tell her, shut up, when there's a knock at the door. I probably shouldn't have did this, but I cautiously cracked open the door and peered out. There outside my front door was a middle-aged man with a black fedora and a dark overcoat. He politely asked me if he could come inside and sit down for a while to get warm. Something told me not to let this guy in, but he didn't seem like a threat, so I let him in. But my dog, she continued to growl, bark, and wouldn't leave my side. So I told him, hey, sit down at the table while I put the dog in the bedroom. When I got back, I was able to get a better look at him. The first thing I noticed, which I didn't notice at the door, was that he had these dark, hollow eyes. I don't mean dark like a black void. I mean regular eyes, but it was like he didn't have any life in him. That shocked me. But then he told me he had plans for me. I didn't know what to say, so I nervously laughed, asking, really? I was starting to seriously get that serial killer vibe from this dude. And I started thinking to myself, I have my pistol in the drawer right beside me. That's when he asked me to come with him. I looked at him and said no. Then he went to a rage, stood up, swung the chair and lunged toward me. But I got the drop on him, pulled open the drawer and grabbed my .45 automatic. I pointed it at him and told him it's time for you to leave. That's when this dude smiles at me and says, you think that's gonna hurt me? My reply was, there's only one way we're gonna find out. Then he smiled, baring these long, sharp, white teeth like an animal. It was at this point that I had enough, and I unloaded my full clip into him. I know I hit this dude, but he just stood there, looking at me and said, your destiny has now vanished. Then he simply disappeared in the thin air. My cabinet, directly behind where he was standing, was riddled with bullet holes. That's when I realized this was some kind of spirit. To this day, I wonder if I made the right choice by shooting at this spirit, because he's been back several times, and even my girlfriend's seen him. And shit's gotten crazy. Just a few days ago, I let my dog out into the backyard. She didn't return. There's nothing usual about that. She likes to stay out at night. But the next day, there was still no sign of my dog, so I went out and looked for her. I found her laying dead near a woodpile. She had been strangled. And if you know anything about dogs, a mastiff is not going to get strangled. Now this spirit appears to me and smiles at me with this huge grin and just shakes his head. I don't know how to stop it, and I don't know what to do. But I'm convinced that this thing killed my dog.